on Book TV. We've got a lot of Charleston literary program planned, so depending on when the Senate is in, we will bring that to you, and we'll make sure that you get a chance to see that. Here's the House of Representatives.
The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., July 28, 2011. I hereby appoint the Honorable Daniel Webster to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed S-1188, an act cited as the All-American Flag Act, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
Pursuant to the order of the House on January 5, 2011, the Chair will now recognize members from a list submitted by the majority and minority leaders for the morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate between parties, and each party will be limited to 1 hour. Each member, other than the minority leader and the majority leader and the minority whip, will be limited to 5 minutes. But in no event will the debate go beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to Paul Callahan, a dedicated staff member in the office of the 2nd Congressional District of South Carolina. After 8 years in Washington, Paul will be departing the office at the end of this month to return home to South Carolina. Paul has been a faithful public servant for the people of South Carolina's 2nd Congressional District since November 2003. He has served in a variety of capacities ranging from scheduler to legislative correspondent to senior legislative assistant. Paul truly fulfills the role of dedicated Hill staffer. Most recently, Paul's portfolio has consisted of banking and financial services, housing, telecommunications, and foreign affairs. His hard work has been a valuable asset in the office for the citizens of South Carolina. It is with sincere gratitude I would like to thank Paul for his expertise and enthusiasm. You will be missed in the office, and I wish you well. I wish you, Jenny, Charlotte, Judah, and month-old Penelope all the best as you enter this next phase of life and move back to Taylor's, South Carolina. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, according to the Wall Street Journal on July 27th, Robert Barrow correctly argues that raising tax rates on Americans is not helpful in putting Americans back on the path to prosperity. Raising taxes does not present a feasible solution in engineering an economic recovery. The solution is to cut spending, just as has occurred previously in Canada in 1993 and in Germany under Chancellor Angela Merkel. The reason our country finds itself in this current fiscal situation is due to Washington's out-of-control spending during the last 3 years. A failed $787 billion stimulus package in 2009 led only to the waste of taxpayer money, along with the hole even deeper than it was intended to fix. But the current administration moved forward with the belief America can borrow and spend its way out of a recession. That has proved to be false. Now the President wants to raise taxes in a way to pay for all the spending. This is irresponsible. Higher revenues will only lead to one thing: more government spending. Tax increases destroy jobs. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism. And I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Cut, cap, and balance. That's the Republican economic vision. Democrats should have a different economic vision for America. Invest, build, and grow. Invest. Conservatives say the federal budget should be like families and businesses, and I agree. But families and businesses don't balance their budgets as Republicans pretend. Families and businesses go into debt by investing rationally in their future. Families go into debt by purchasing homes and cars and sending their children to college. Businesses go into debt to grow their companies. We should invest in things that will put Americans to work in a full employment economy and make America's future bright with balanced economic growth. Build. We need to put America back to work by building America. The New Deal did not pull us out of the Great Depression. World War II did. The government, not the private sector, the government's conduct of the war and the government's role in steering the economy won World War II and pulled us out of the Great Depression. Government did that. Government stimulated the public and the private economy. If we rationally invest a similar amount of money in our domestic economy as we did to win World War II, we can pull America out of this Great Recession just like we pulled America out of the Great Depression. Grow. We need to grow the economy in a balanced fashion. 2 large tax cuts in 2001 and 2003 to the wealthy and big corporations, the so-called job creators, didn't create jobs in the private sector. Indeed, only 1 million net new jobs were created between 2001 and 2009, all government jobs. The private sector reported minus 600,000 jobs. So much for giving tax breaks to the private job generators. Some argue against all debt, but all debts aren't bad because all debts are not the same. A $50,000 gambling debt is bad because it has no return. The last decade showed that gambling on tax cuts for rich to create jobs was bad. Gambling on 2 wars and not paying for them was bad. Gambling on a new prescription drug law that was unpaid for was horrible. And gambling on unregulated financial institutions that failed was bad. And they resulted in a housing market collapse, slow economic growth, high unemployment, and huge deficits and debts, all bad. So I think we've gambled enough on the theory that budget cuts and tax cuts generate private sector jobs and more taxes. The Laffer, L-A-F-F-E-R curve, is truly a laugher. One more point, however, Mr. Speaker, where Republicans are right. We do have a spending problem. We spent too little in the economic stimulus package of 2009, and we spent it on the wrong things. 1/3 of which were tax cuts to the rich that conservative Republicans insisted be included even though they still voted against it. And rather than spending to create jobs by directly investing in things we need, new schools, new hospitals, new water and sewer systems, public transportation, high-speed rail, bridges, ports, airports, and more, Congress passed an economic stimulus package that kept us from falling into a Great Depression. But it was not enough to generate the growth necessary to create the number of jobs that we need. But too many in Congress drew the wrong conclusion. It reminds me of a man whose house caught on fire, and when he tried to put it out with a water hose, he concluded that water does not put out fires. Water does put out fires, Mr. Speaker, but you have to have enough of it to fit the size of the fire. You have to put it in the right place. So there you have it, Mr. Speaker. 2 choices for America: cut, cap, and balance, or invest, build, and grow. That's the choice before the American people. Both visions offer constitutional amendments. Cut, cap, and balance offers a balanced budget amendment that guarantees slow growth and few jobs. But a different vision of invest, grow, and build can be enhanced with a different set of constitutional amendments: education, health care, and the environment, just to name 3. According to the Congressional Research Service, over 51% of all jobs in America are tied to the First Amendment. Television networks, radio stations, the recording industry, wire services, Facebook, Google, iPad, movie studios, the Internet, newspaper, magazines, and more. In fact, most corporate activity in America is defined as First Amendment activity. How many jobs would be created if we added an amendment to the Constitution that gave every American student the right to a public education of equal high quality? How many new elementary schools would have to be built? How many old schools would have to be rehabilitated and made modern? How many teachers and counselors would have to be hired? How much wire installed for the Internet? How many computers built and purchased? How many desks built and bought? That's what H.J. Res. 29, an education amendment, would demand. How many jobs would be created if we added an amendment that guaranteed every American the right to health care of equal high quality? How many new hospitals built? How many doctors, nurses, and dentists, administrators, and technicians trained? Mr. Speaker, a different vision of America is possible. I'm not giving up on our country, and neither should we. I thank the Speaker.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Pompeo, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Throughout history, great change has mostly come from steady, determined, hard work performed over long, long periods of time. Think of our revolution. It took years. Think of the war that freed the slaves and the progression towards racial equality. It's taken years. Think of the continued long march against radical Islamic terrorism that continues today. Today, the challenge we face is a frightening economic challenge. We must put people back to work. We've got to grow our economy so we can pay off the crushing debt that has been heaped upon the next generation over the past 40 years. It's the fight of my generation. Now, there are two worldviews to tackle this problem that threatens our republic. The first, offered by the President and those who control Washington, D.C. today, is more government, more spending, more redistribution of wealth, and more physical and spiritual dependence on government. The American people rejected this worldview on November 2nd, 2010. Now, there's a second view. It's one that offers liberty and freedom from government instead of control by government. It recognizes that the left's morally misguided policies will expand government, suffocate growth, further depress job creation, and push millions of people farther away from any hope of rising out of poverty. These policies negatively impact American culture by squelching individual responsibility and initiative and work ethic. America has always had a cultural bias in favor of productive work and has disapproved of the easy acceptance of charity and welfare payment when these are not necessary and when one can provide for oneself. Now, these competing visions of America frame the debate over reducing our nation's spending addiction. It's the fight we're having today. And so today I will vote for a bill that for the first time in decades begins to turn the tide against the radical, job-killing spending of our current president. Now, it's true that the election of President Barack Obama in 2008 and the Democratic retention of the Senate in 2010 continue to have consequences. So this bill is necessarily insufficient. It does not complete the mission. If this plan is all we ever do, we plainly will have failed the task that the new class of freshmen was sent to Washington, D.C. to take on. But it's not all we'll do. We will continue to execute the will of the American people, and we will hold this republic together by ending this spending addiction that has afflicted this town for decades. This bill is the Lexington Concord of the American Revolution. It is antecedent to our Civil War. It is D-Day to World War II. It is the first skirmish in a very long battle. That great Kansan General Eisenhower did not declare victory on June 6, 1944, after America successfully commenced its liberation of Europe. Rather, he acknowledged a good day, that the battle had been joined, and had a deep recognition that he needed to continue to execute his battle plan. The American people spoke on November 2, 2010, and we now begin to do what they demand that we do. This bill we vote on today honors that commitment. We said we would not raise taxes. This bill does not do that. Our president complains. We said we would not increase the debt limit beyond the amount of spending reductions that we undertake. This bill does that, and our president complains. These were bold commitments we made to the American people, especially when Washington, D.C. continues to be controlled by liberal Democrats. How could we be sure that a rump group of Republicans could accomplish this? It had never been done before. But today we have an opportunity. This monumental struggle begins. How big will our federal government be? And will our country return to its constitutional role of having bounded government? In Kansas, I know its battle sometimes looks messy. Big challenges often look that way. Today, however, I can say clearly that we have stopped a president intent on growing government and have begun to head down a path towards prosperity for our nation and freedom. It's a good day. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, for 5 minutes. Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, last week the United Nations declared famine in Somalia and reported urgent needs in Ethiopia and Kenya. On our nightly TV news and daily papers, we are seeing the pictures of people dying, of children suffering extreme malnutrition, and mothers carrying their babies walking over 100 miles in search of food and safe haven. Tens of thousands of people in Somalia have already died. The Horn of Africa is suffering a devastating drought, with this year being recorded in some locations as the driest or second driest year on record since 1951. The impact has been compounded by war, neglect, and spiraling food prices. Currently, some 11.5 million people across East Africa urgently need food aid, medical supplies, and care. More than 130,000 Somali refugees have left their country for refugee camps along the borders of Ethiopia and Kenya. They arrive exhausted and physically depleted. News reports estimate that about 1,300 Somali refugees arrive in northern Kenya every single day. They join already overcrowded camps and stress the ability of the Kenyan government and humanitarian agencies to provide food, water, emergency care, and shelter. Working with local partners and NGOs such as Doctors Without Borders, Save the Children, and Italian Aid, UNICEF will be vaccinating hundreds of thousands of children. Dehydrated and suffering from malnutrition, these children, especially those under the age of 5, are particularly susceptible to the measles, polio, diarrhea, and pneumonia. To date, in fiscal year 2011, the United States has provided over $450 million in humanitarian aid to the Horn of Africa through USAID's Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance and the Food for Peace program, along with refugee assistance from the State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. But much more needs to be done. The next 3 to 6 months will be critical. The drought is expected to worsen, at least through the end of the year, and then we will wait to see what happens during the next cycle of rains. Will communities be able to recover? Will small farmers be able to plant new crops? Or will heavy rains produce floods that drive communities deeper into poverty? My colleagues need to understand, however, that the current crisis, terrible as it is, could have been much worse. There is good news amongst so much tragedy. The last time a drought of this magnitude hit Ethiopia, over 14 million people faced starvation. This time, about 4.5 million Ethiopians are in need of emergency aid. The difference? Since 2005, the United States and other donors have made significant investments in Ethiopia's Productive Safety Net program. I saw firsthand several of these programs in 2007. They help small farmers in poor communities diversify the crops they planted, broaden their sources of income, create local markets, better manage their water resources, and increase the nutritional content of their own diets and those of their children. This has enabled over 7.5 million Ethiopians to withstand the worst effects of the current drought. These families and communities are not part of the 4.5 million Ethiopians who require urgent humanitarian aid. Mr. Speaker, these programs work. They were models for Feed the Future, our current global program to promote sustainable agriculture, food security, and nutrition. It's how you end global hunger, Mr. Speaker. It's the difference between needing to help rescue 4 million people rather than 14 million people. It's also the difference between investing $6 per person each year so they become more food secure and resilient to disasters, or having to invest $250 per person to deliver emergency relief that only covers 3 to 4 months. It's the smart way to invest our development resources. And, Mr. Speaker, this is why I am so appalled by what happened yesterday in the markup of the State Foreign Operations Appropriations Bill. Development, humanitarian, and disaster aid programs were all brutally cut. These cuts come on top of the Agriculture Appropriations Bill that devastated our emergency food aid programs. With the worst drought in 60 years hitting the Horn of Africa, these cuts amount to the United States turning its back on its own strategic interests and walking away from our international commitments. Instead, we need to increase our emergency response to the current crisis, ensure that we have the resources to invest in long-term development, and continue our global leadership in ending hunger and famine once and for all. We need to do better, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, time is up. It's time for the administration to quit stalling and make a decision on the Keystone XL pipeline project, the pipeline that comes from our friends in Canada, from Alberta, all the way down to my congressional district in southeast Texas to the refineries in Port Arthur, Texas. The House has done its job this week by passing a bill to move this decision along. Now it's the Senate's turn to pass the bill so the administration can make a decision on the Keystone XL project that will create thousands of American jobs and decrease our dependence on unfriendly nations for energy. I commend my friend from Nebraska, Mr. Terry, for passing this legislation and being the spearhead of this legislation. All that has to happen is the State Department has to make a decision and the administration has to support that decision one way or the other. It's been 3 years for the administration to make a decision, yes or no, on the XL pipeline. It's time to fish or cut bait. Pick a horse and ride it. The administration must make a decision. And this should be, to me, an easy choice for this administration. Either they can force Americans to continue to rely on unfriendly foreign countries for our energy, like Venezuela and the Middle Eastern dictators, by depriving Americans of a reliable source of oil at a time when gas prices are around $4, or they can work with our friends in the North to supply over 1.4 million barrels of oil per day. Pipelines are the proven and safe, efficient source of energy. Best of all, this project creates thousands of jobs at a time when unemployment in this country is 9.2%, and it is climbing. I would think this job-creating, shovel-ready project, which my liberal friends always talk about, would be something they would support and the administration would support. As the administration continues to stonewall our own domestic production, we must safely and immediately look for ways to meet energy needs. The country needs energy. It needs jobs. This project provides both. What's the holdup, Mr. President? For every barrel of oil shipped 1,000 miles, less than 1 teaspoon of liquid is lost from a pipeline. Transporting goods by pipeline has the lowest carbon footprint as compared with other transportation modes. Crude oil has to get to America some way. It either comes by barge or truck or rail or marine, and pipelines historically are the safest way to transport crude oil. Attacking a pipeline on environmental grounds seems to be absurd to me. Pipelines have been the most cost-effective and environmentally sound way to transport oil and natural gas. A medium-sized pipeline, which is about 150,000 barrels a day, requires operating more than 750 trucks or a 75-car train every day to transport the same amount of crude oil. Transporting oil through a pipeline is far safer than using transportation by oil tankers. When an oil tanker has a major oil spill, millions of barrels of oil can be spilled in a matter of a few minutes, few hours, or just a few days. Nearly 500,000 miles of natural gas and crude oil pipelines are in the United States. 500,000 miles of pipeline. Texas has over half of these in the state of Texas alone, 270,000 miles of pipeline. And about one-third of that, one-third of all the nation's pipelines, I understand, go through the energy capital of the world, my district in southeast Texas. If we don't use the crude oil from China in this pipeline, the Canadians could very easily, instead of have a north to south pipeline, have a pipeline east to west and pipe it to the coast, west coast, and then ship it to our good buddies, the Chinese, who want to buy it. You know, Americans' energy plan seems to be twofold. Send money to Brazil and let the Brazilians drill off their coast and we'll buy their crude oil. And the second part is make sure we use those cute little curly CFL light bulbs. And that's it. It's time that we take care of ourselves. This is a good project for America, American jobs, and a way to get crude oil into the United States. It's time for the White House to make a decision. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The members are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, gentlemen. With one simple vote last December, Congress precipitated the so-called debt crisis. We voted to extend all of the Bush tax cuts at a cost of $4 trillion over 10 years. I voted no. So now the debate comes down to what's more important to the American people, Social Security or tax cuts, Medicare or tax cuts, jobs or tax cuts. That's what this debate is all about right now, preserving tax cuts, particularly tax cuts for the wealthy and the largest multinational corporations in this country. Some are still trying to drag Social Security into this debate. Social Security did not cause 1 penny of this debt. In fact, Social Security is the largest owner of federal debt in the world. They're the largest investor in federal debt. Social Security did not cause this problem. Yes, long-term, starting 2037, Social Security is projected to only be able to pay 73 to 75% of benefits. We can solve that simply. Ask all Americans to pay the same percent of their income into Social Security. Today, if you earn over $106,800, you pay a lower percentage of your income into Social Security. Lift that cap. You could lower the tax for everybody. All those who earn less than $106,800, they'd get a little tax cut. Everybody who earns more than $106,800 would pay the same percent of their income in taxes as those who earn less. That's fair. It solves Social Security problems forever. Then there are others who say, well, it's Medicare. Medicare's the thing we got to kill. The Ryan plan, the Republican plan. Kill Medicare. Turn it into a voucher program. That's their solution there. Future seniors would have a subsidy to go to a government-sponsored exchange to buy private health insurance, and the voucher would be far less than the cost of health insurance. We don't need to kill Medicare to save it or to preserve the tax cuts. Medicare, we could do away with the Bush Republican unpaid-for prescription drug benefit that subsidizes the pharmaceutical and insurance industries and instead say Medicare will negotiate lower drug prices for all people on that program and give them an at-cost benefit. That saves $20 billion a year. We could reform the way we buy durable medical equipment and save another $20 billion a year, and then we could move on to paying doctors for good results rather than volume saving tens of billions more. Yes, we can fix Medicare. We don't need to destroy it, and we don't need to destroy it to perpetuate tax cuts. And then tax cuts create jobs. That's the reason we have to maintain the tax cuts, according to the Republicans. Tax cuts create jobs. Well, we're in the 11th year of the Bush tax cuts, the 3rd year of the Obama tax cuts that supposedly are creating jobs. Well, where are the jobs? In fact, we just had a really good demonstration this last week. Last Friday, all taxes on airline tickets expired. Now, Republicans say, well, that'll get passed on to the consumers. No, most of the airlines are keeping the money. That's another issue. But did those tax cuts create jobs? No, actually, so far they've cost us 94,000 jobs. 4,000 federal employees. Now, they hate federal employees, so that doesn't matter to them. But 90,000 private sector construction jobs building critical security and safety projects on airports all across the country have all ground to a halt because they stopped us from continuing to collect that fee, that tax on people who use the system. So tax cuts actually have destroyed 94,000 jobs, but they have profited a number of the airlines. One major airline, $4 million extra a day, because guess what? They raised their ticket prices to capture that money. They didn't refund it. A couple, like Alaska, have refunded it, but most airlines, no. So we're putting a lie to a lot of their policies here. And the biggest core part of their policy is trickle-down economics. It failed in the Reagan years, and it's failing again now. Give billionaires, the job creators, tax cuts, and they'll create jobs for us little people. Well, guess what? No. Yeah, maybe they hired another pool boy or someone else on the yacht. You know, yeah, there are a few jobs there. They're now hiring private jets to fly their kids to camp in Maine. Yeah, there's a job there. But not the jobs that 18 million American people need. If we restore the taxes on airline tickets, we'd put 90,000 construction workers, private sector workers back to work, and 4,000 government employees. And if we fully fund our transportation needs in this country, we could put another 2.7 to 3.5 million people to work. No, they want to cut investment in transportation infrastructure. Bridges are failing. They're falling down. The roads are potholed. Transit systems are decrepit. And the Republican answer is, give the people back their money and cut spending on those wasteful things like mass transit, bridges, and highways. And oh, by the way, under their plan, we lose another 600,000 private sector jobs on top of the 20% unemployment in construction. It's time to get real around here. Put America back to work. If Americans were working, that would solve 1/4 of the
Chair
deficit
recognizes
problem.
the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brooks.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brooks, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have voted to raise the debt ceiling where the bill makes America's financial condition better, not worse. In my judgment, both the Reid and Boehner plans fail to adequately address unsustainable deficits that threaten America with insolvency and bankruptcy. Both plans punt the debt ceiling issue to 2012 or 2013, at which time a financially weaker America will confront a worse debt ceiling crisis. Both plans simply are not up to the seriousness of the financial challenges America faces. Washington must put 2012 election considerations aside and put America's interests first and foremost now. Congress and the White House can and must do better now. America deserves better now. And quite frankly, we have no choice but to do better now. Years of spending binges by the federal government have come home to roost. America's debt exceeds $14 trillion. America has suffered 3 consecutive years of trillion-dollar deficits and faces trillion-dollar deficits into the foreseeable future. Annual deficits and accumulated debt force America to confront 2 major financial threats, both with one common cause: unsustainable budget deficits. In the short term, America faces a debt ceiling crisis. If the debt ceiling is not raised, economic hardship will ensue, unemployment rates will rise, America's gross domestic product will decline. Over a longer term, however, America faces a larger, more serious debt crisis. If trillion-dollar deficits continue to run rampant, America's insolvency and bankruptcy is certain, which risk America's national defense capabilities, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, NASA, and everything else that the government provides. The question is not whether Congress will raise the debt ceiling. The question is when and how. I have already voted to raise the debt ceiling $2.4 trillion via the cut cap and balance bill. By FY12 expenditures, we're cutting FY12 expenditures by a modest $111 billion in the context of a $1.5 trillion deficit, capping federal government expenditures within historically 18% to 20% ranges, and passing a balanced budget constitutional amendment that protects future generations from the financial mess we now face. I am prepared to vote to raise the debt ceiling again, so long as Congress substantively addresses our underlying annual deficit problem while protecting our fragile economy and jobs. As best I can with the limited and changing information available, I have examined both the Boehner and Reid plans. While they differ in many respects, they also share common concepts. Neither plan purports to immediately raise taxes. Neither plan cuts spending in FY 2012 or 2013 as much as 5% of this year's $1.5 trillion deficit. Neither plan eliminates annual trillion-dollar deficits into the foreseeable future. Both plans raise the debt ceiling by $1 to $2.7 trillion. Both plans kick the can down the road and force America to revisit the debt ceiling crisis in either 2012 or 2013, at which time America's debt burden will be much higher and America will be that much weaker. Neither plan heeds Standard & Poor's or Moody's credit downgrade warnings. Neither plan cuts America's short or long-term deficits enough to minimize the risk of downgrade in America's credit rating, a downgrade that will drive up America's debt service costs and cut funding for all other federal government programs. To make matters worse, if America's interest rates go up, state and local private interest rates are likely to also go up, thereby hurting Americans at all levels. There is only one reliable solution that I can discern that protects America from both financial threats: a debt ceiling increase coupled with a balanced budget constitutional amendment that is phased in over a 5-year period of time. Inasmuch as constitutional amendments often take years to pass, time that America does not have, the first step must be to raise the debt ceiling when Congress passes a substantive balanced budget constitutional amendment. If the Senate and House concur, this can be done in as little as a week. The second step, equally important, raises the rest of the debt ceiling when the states ratify the proposed balanced budget amendment, thus giving states a needed incentive to ratify the balanced budget amendment in less than 1 year. This approach solves both financial threats. Quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, I pray that Washington has the strength to do what it must before it is too late. America is on the verge of a downward spiral. We must act now, and we must act in substantive ways. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Neal, for 5 minutes.
Speaker, request the opportunity to address the House for 5 minutes for 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to talk about our current fiscal situation and how we got to where we are today. The thought that America would default on its obligations is unimaginable. This afternoon, we're going to begin a debate on Speaker Boehner's debt ceiling legislation, and I'll comment later on why I oppose the Speaker's approach. But before we begin that debate, I think it's important to acknowledge, step back, and review how we got to where we are. The success of the 1993 Deficit Reduction Act, which was vehemently opposed by our Republican friends, led to a decade of prosperity and surplus. President Clinton balanced the budget for the first time since 1969 and ran surpluses for 4 years. Between 1998 and 2000, the publicly held debt was reduced by $363 billion, the largest paydown in American history. Under Presidents Reagan and Bush, the debt held by the public quadrupled. By the time Bill Clinton left office, the budget was on track to pay off the entire publicly held debt on a net basis by 2009. Remember, Alan Greenspan warned us that we were paying down the debt too quickly. The clock in Times Square, which has chronicled the deficits, was actually turned off at the end of the Clinton years. But unfortunately, there were those who thought that we should shift course. Economic growth averaged 4% during those Clinton years, compared to an average of 2.8% during President Reagan's years. The economy grew for 116 consecutive months, the most in history, fueled by more than 22.5 million jobs that were created during those 8 years, the most ever created during a single administration, and more jobs that were created during the 12 previous years. On January 20th, when George Bush took the oath of office, the CBO estimated that the budget surplus for 2002 to 2011 would be $5.6 trillion. And their campaign began to spend that surplus in earnest despite warnings. President Bush began taking us down that fiscal path by enacting tax cuts, first in 2001 of $1.3 trillion, again in 2003, $1 trillion, that cost the government going forward almost $4 trillion. The other major expenditure during that year and those years was our idea that you could simultaneously engage 2 wars and cut taxes by $2.3 trillion. Remember the argument about weapons of mass destruction that took us to the unnecessary war in Iraq. While some questioned tax cuts in wartime, including people like Mr. Lincoln, others thought it brilliant. The Republican leader at the time, or the deputy leader at the time, said it was patriotic to cut taxes in a time of war. Well, I wonder if the veterans, 2.2 million more who have served us with honor and distinction in Iraq and Afghanistan, are going to feel that way when proposals come down the road to draw back on the benefits that they've earned. During the Bush years, our country spent $1.5 trillion in Iraq and national defense. The turnaround in our budget picture during the Bush years was remarkable. In October of 2008, CNN reported that the debt clock had run out of numbers. The debt clock actually had exceeded 13 digits that had been allotted to the clock and had to be revised. According to one report at the end of the Bush term, the number of jobs in the nation increased by 2%. That's the lowest or most tepid growth at any time since data began to be collected 7 decades ago. Gross domestic product was at the lowest pace for a period of that length of time since the Truman administration. And the price that America has paid for the theology that suggested during all of those years that tax cuts pay for themselves. You can't find a mainstream economist in this town today who will acknowledge that argument. And yet we hear now more tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. By the time that the Bush years ended, the debt had increased to $10.6 trillion, setting a record for any administration. And incidentally, the TARP vote that we hear so often, that took place in October of 2008. That's a very important consideration. That was during President Bush's years. But let me give you a quote that I think sums up much of what we did during those years. Dick Cheney told the Treasury Secretary at the time, Paul O'Neill, quote, "Reagan proved that deficits don't matter. We won the third-term election. This is our due." We embraced a prescription D Medicare benefit that we're paying a price for today. So here we are. My Republican colleagues try to place the blame for this situation on the current administration. There were many of us who saw what was happening with the reckless expenditure during those years and the price that America paid. We need to vote to raise the debt ceiling. It's
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Barletta, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Almost 7 months ago, I stood in this chamber and took the oath of office. It was one of the proudest days of my life. Since my swearing in, we've worked together to change the direction of this country, and we've changed it for the better. We've cut federal spending by $361 billion. We've repealed an unpopular and unwanted government health care plan. And we've started dialing back some of the overregulation that's been slowing our economic growth. During my short time here in Washington, I've heard some very passionate arguments, and I've seen some very heated debates. But they are nothing, Mr. Speaker, like the angry, confusing, misleading rhetoric I've heard in the last 2 weeks regarding the raising of the debt ceiling. Some media reports around the Capitol make it seem like we will never come to an agreement. Not only are Democrats and Republicans seemingly miles apart, but it appears as if both parties have splintered eternally. The bickering is dividing our government. It's dividing the American people. And it's bringing us to the brink of financial disaster. Based on the calls my office has received over the past several days, my neighbors back in northeastern Pennsylvania want it to stop. They want a solution. And I'm sure every one of you and your neighbors back home do too. There is no such thing as the perfect deal. There is no such thing as complete and total victory. Many of us came here opposed to raising the debt ceiling. Many of us prefer the cut, cap, and balance approach. Many on the other side prefer a clean debt ceiling increase with no spending cuts. While the Budget Control Act is far from perfect, it accommodates the priorities of the people sitting on both sides of the table, both sides of the aisle, and both sides of the Capitol. If we in this chamber, if our friends in the other chamber, or if the President holds out for the perfect plan, well, the United States will likely default on its obligations. As the responsible stewards of the people's government, we cannot let that happen. And I am confident that we will not let it happen. But we need to work together. We need to trust each other. We need to realize that the perfect deal is neither possible nor practical. We are at a critical moment in our history. This country has lived far beyond its means for far too long. The out-of-control spending has been going on in Washington for generations. Government spent as if there was no tomorrow, and now we and our children and our grandchildren are left to pay the price. I know the debt ceiling has been raised before to the benefit of both Republican and Democratic administrations. Well, I wasn't there then, and I didn't create this mess, but I'm sure going to clean it up, and that's why I'm here. That's why the people of northeastern Pennsylvania sent me here. And while the thought of re-election should never, never enter anyone's minds when we're doing the people's business, let me say that this issue is far bigger than the next election. This issue is far bigger than one man, or one branch of government, or one political party. How we solve this looming crisis is the defining issue of this Congress. We can either continue on the path that we've been on, a path of reckless spending, of increasing taxes, of mounting debts and deficits, or we can change our direction. We can put the brakes on the out-of-control spending. We can forge a new direction, one of fiscal responsibility, one of capped spending, one of balanced budgets. We can send a message to the American people and to the world that the United States is getting its fiscal house in order. And if we do that, we can bring stability to the shaky global economy. We can reassure skeptical business owners and encourage them to create jobs. And we can create a better financial future for our children and our grandchildren. I believe our choice is clear. I ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, when you reach for your voting cards today, first take a glance at the pictures in your wallets of your children and your grandchildren. We are not Republicans. We are not Democrats. We are Americans. Today, let's put the American people first. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky, for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to discuss the catastrophic famine that continues to unfold in the Horn of Africa. Eastern Africa is currently in the grips of the worst drought in 60 years, affecting 11 million people in Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. According to the UN, Somalia now faces the highest malnutrition rates in the world, and some 3 million Somalis are in desperate need of immediate emergency aid. The UN estimates that tens of thousands of Somalis have died of drought-related causes in the past few months, and acute malnutrition rates in the country's southern region now exceed 30%. Thousands more are fleeing areas controlled by the al-Qaeda-affiliated militant group Al-Shabaab, which even in the face of such large-scale human suffering refuses to allow major humanitarian groups to deliver aid. Some 50,000 Somalis have returned to the capital despite continued violence and instability in search of food and medicine. Others have sought refuge from hunger and warfare in neighboring countries. Nearly 400,000 Somalis have crowded into Kenya's Dadaab refugee camp, a complex designed to house only 90,000 people. Another 9,000 arrive in the camp each week, and thousands of other Somalis continue to flee Ethiopia in search of food. Many, particularly children and the elderly, do not survive the harsh trek. The warning signs of impending disaster have been visible for months, but the international community has been slow to respond. Aid is slowly now beginning to trickle in, however. The UN's World Food Program has begun an emergency airlift of food. The first flight arrived in Mogadishu yesterday, bringing 10 tons of nutritional supplements for children. The World Food Program says that is enough to treat 3,500 malnourished children for 1 month. Clearly, the need is far greater. The World Food Program plans to increase its efforts in hope of reaching over 2 million people in Somalia's south. Likewise, the United States have provided much-needed assistance to 4.4 million drought-affected people in eastern Africa. Since last October, our government has given $383 million in life-saving aid, including 348,000 metric tons of food. Further, this week, the Obama administration announced a further $28 million in emergency assistance for famine relief in Somalia. This aid is critical, and I commend the President for these steps. However, the scale of the current crisis requires a much greater response, as well as creative solutions tailored to the unique threats posed by Somalia's persistent instability and violence. For example, because Al-Shabaab is a terrorist organization, we continue to impose restrictions on aid organizations delivering assistance to the hard-hit regions under its control. We need to work with these humanitarian groups to ensure that, despite Somalia's continuing warfare and lack of governance, desperately needed aid can reach the most vulnerable men, women, and children. Mr. Speaker, we need to act quickly to fight famine and save lives. We also need to address the long-term underlying causes that have left Somalia's people so vulnerable to drought and malnutrition. Even before the most recent crisis, Somalia was locked in a cycle of warfare, lawlessness, and bitter poverty. One expert recently called Somalia's current plight a catastrophic failure of all the systems that people rely on to survive. That's why part of our response must be an investment in resilience and food security. Part of our response must be an effort to address the long-standing violent conflict that has torn Somalia apart. Part of our response must go toward long-term economic development and capacity building. We need to act immediately to ensure that humanitarian aid can reach the millions of Eastern Africans who face imminent malnutrition and starvation that we're watching every day on television. I urge the United States and the international community to immediately scale up efforts to deliver urgent assistance to children and other vulnerable individuals. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Pence, for 5 minutes.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Gentleman suspended. Chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
Without objection.
As America watches and the world watches from afar, Washington, D.C. debates a debt ceiling increase and debates various proposals for confronting it in a manner that is consistent with our commitment to this generation and the next. For the past 10 years, I've been fighting runaway federal spending, deficits, debt, and takeovers here in Washington, D.C. by both political parties. Now, I recognize if you owe debts, pay debts. This Congress has an obligation to defend the full faith and credit of the United States of America and find a way, rather, to pay our bills. But this Congress also has an obligation to keep faith with this and future generations by restoring fiscal responsibility and discipline to our national treasury. I've come to the conclusion over the last decade that Washington, D.C. is not only broke, it's broken. As a colleague of mine said earlier this week, the American people don't just want a deal, they want a solution. And I rise to say that I believe a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States is that solution. I told my colleagues earlier this week I did not want to vote for any increase in the debt ceiling unless this Congress did everything in its power to send a balanced budget amendment to the Senate and to the states. Earlier today, we learned that Speaker Boehner and Leader Cantor have made a decision for this Friday to bring two separate balanced budget amendments to the floor, and I heartily support their decision. The first balanced budget amendment will include spending limitations and require a supermajority on tax increases, and I support those measures. But the second balanced budget amendment hasn't seen action here on the House floor for 15 years. 15 years ago, what is commonly referred to as the historic or the clean balanced budget amendment received overwhelming and bipartisan support, some 300 votes on the floor of the House of Representatives and almost passed the Senate. I believe that by bringing that historic balanced budget amendment to the floor of this Congress this week, we are doing all we can to send the balanced budget amendment to the Senate and to the states. And with that, I inform my colleagues today that I will support the Boehner plan. I will support the Budget Control Act. And I urge all of my colleagues to join me in doing the same. Now, the Budget Control Act has much to recommend it. It has no tax increases, and we have confirmed from the CBO dollar-for-dollar spending cuts to match any increase in the debt ceiling. And there are mechanisms for additional cuts and additional reforms. But the Budget Control Act also includes a requirement that the Senate vote between October and November of this year on a balanced budget amendment. Again, let me say, a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution has not been considered in the Congress for 15 years, despite overwhelming public support across this country. Now, I'm for the version of the balanced budget amendment with various limits, but I believe it's it's vitally important that Republican leadership has chosen to bring the bipartisan version to the floor, to play it straight, and give us a fighting chance to get those two-thirds votes necessary to amend the Constitution. So I rise to announce my support for the Budget Control Act. I rise to express gratitude to Speaker Boehner and Leader Cantor, who listened to colleagues like myself who thought we could improve the circumstances of this vote by accelerating and improving our choices for a balanced budget amendment. And frankly, I also rise to commend all of my colleagues who've held out for a better deal. I want to say from my heart, this is better. History is often made in unexpected ways and at unexpected times. I believe with the consideration of the Budget Control Act on the floor today, we have an opportunity to make progress toward restoring fiscal discipline to Washington, D.C. But I believe with consideration of the balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States tomorrow, we have an opportunity to make history. So I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting the Budget Control Act on the floor today. But I also urge all of my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats alike, to join us as we make a good faith effort to send a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States, to the Senate and to the states. Let us put into the national charter that this national government, for this generation and the next, must again live within our means.
Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend and to submit extraneous material for the record. I rise today as a founding co-chair of the 39-member Out of Poverty Caucus to talk about the millions of people living in poverty in America. Nearly 45 million Americans live in poverty, and 1 in 5 children are growing up in poverty. The recession may be over for big corporations and the super rich, but for far too many Americans, the recession is actually a depression. Yesterday, the Out of Poverty Caucus held a press conference with organizations working on the front lines with low-income and poor people. We heard stories of more homelessness, long lines at food pantries, and the desperation felt by so many. Our nation's unemployment rate remains at an unacceptably high 9.2%. Millions of Americans who have lost their jobs are finding it harder and harder to find a new one. These new ranks of the long-term unemployed and their families are facing the stark reality of life in poverty for the first time. The ongoing impact of the recession on struggling families and those facing or living in poverty simply must not be ignored. But instead of working to improve the lives of millions of Americans in poverty, the Republican Party continues their drive to plunge our nation into default and our economy over the brink. Speaker Boehner has unveiled yet another Republican plan that fails to do what America needs. His plan fails to end the threat of default. His plan targets the programs aimed at America's most vulnerable, our seniors, our children, and our low-income families, far more draconian cuts. Trying to balance the budget on the backs of the poor is morally wrong. We need a balanced approach that balances targeted cuts with the revenue that we need. We must make sure that we can pay the benefits that we owe to our seniors, protect Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and safeguard our most vulnerable communities. Mr. Speaker, while the nation's unemployment level remains unacceptably high, for some minority communities, it was double digits even before the recession began. The unemployment rate for African Americans today is recorded at 16.2%, and Latinos recorded at 11.2%. And what many of us have known for a long, long time now, African Americans and Latinos have lost 18 to 20 times their net worth, more so than white Americans, due to structural inequalities, where race is a factor. These numbers are horrific and speak to the larger crisis facing our nation, the jobs crisis. Let me share the story of one American who is looking for a job. Reverend David was laid off from a job as the successful executive director of a faith-based nonprofit that served the disadvantaged and worked to put people on a path to self-sufficiency. Now he is relying on the very safety net programs that he used to connect others to. He diligently job hunts week after week. David and his wife rely on unemployment benefits to make ends meet, and he is worried about what he will do when he reaches 99-week limit of those benefits. The Reverend is not alone. 45 million Americans worry about where they will sleep at night, if their children will eat, what will happen if they need medical attention, and when will they secure a living wage job. We must work together to help the millions of Americans who are still struggling to recover from the Great Recession. As the first order of business, I again call on the Speaker to bring my legislation, H.R. 589, to the floor for an up or down vote immediately. This would add 14 weeks of retroactive emergency unemployment benefits to those long-term unemployed known as 99ers who continue to face uncertainty and hardships. Passing this extension will stimulate our economy, not to mention that it is our moral responsibility to help those in need. But people really want to work. Instead of creating jobs, Republicans are holding our economy hostage, putting forth policies that will create more unemployment and more job loss. Instead of quickly passing a clean debt ceiling vote, the Republicans are marching lockstep to create this default. Instead of supporting the vital human needs programs that will protect our most vulnerable, Republicans are trying to balance the budget on the backs of the poor while maintaining these tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires and big oils. Mr. Speaker, there's no more time for these Republican games. The American people expect us to put partisanship aside to protect our economy and create jobs. The American dream has been a nightmare for the 45 million living in poverty and is turning quickly into a nightmare for millions who are falling from middle income into the ranks of the poor. The bill put forth today by Republicans guarantees this tragic outcome.
From Ms.